This is a research proposal to identify tools to facilitate upward mobility of native Haitian tenants at the Medford Housing Authority in Massachusetts. Here we see two Medford housing success stories. Berlanda on the right, black suit, has just passed her citizenship test. She's been our secretary for 6 months and a family resident for 2 years at a public housing. To her right is Berlanda, who was a Section 8, went become a member of her staff, went for further education, and is now the manager of her elderly development, a 142-unit development. Current public housing trends. Current political trends view public housing as the cause of social issues of poverty and crime rather than helping solve those issues. As a result, public housing is being torn down to make way for mixed income developments and has become a form of urban renewal. Secondly, studies by HUD and Harvard focus on taking public policy tenants out of public housing into neighborhoods with lower crime and greater affluence to foster upward mobility of tenants. This has worked to some degree, but it lessens the importance of preserving public housing. We'll look into all items later in greater depth. Programs developed that blame tenants for having become dependent on public service and divide policies that wean them off these services, namely public housing. We'll look at the Worcester model that does this. Record demolition of public housing. Public housing is being torn down at record rates to make way for mixed income developments, a form of urban renewal. Public housing, often ill-designed and poorly maintained, usually has the further bad luck to be in areas near downtown centers that have become extremely lucrative developments to developers if public housing tenants are eliminated. The new mixed income developments typically only house 1/5 of public housing residents that are displaced, with the rest dispersed at a lower level of services than they had previously. Upward mobility, is it better and better neighborhoods? Certainly. Studies by HUD and Harvard focused on taking public housing tenants out of poor-performing public housing into neighborhoods with lower crime and greater affluence to foster upward mobility of tenants. And they found that this has worked with children primarily. The longer the children are in these affluent communities, the better they fare. The upward mobility of those is noted by the ability of the persons in the lower fifth to advance to the upper fifth of income. This is a lesson learned by the Haitian communities. They left to settle in the Northeast, where there were more affluent cities, such as New York and Boston. And then they tended to move to more affluent neighborhoods in the suburbs of these cities, where public housing was available as well. This map of upward mobility nationally, presented by the New York Times, you can see that the highest areas of opportunity are in the Northeast, the West Coasts, and surprisingly down from the north down the central United States. The least opportunities are in the South and in the so-called Rust Belt. Boston ranks 7th out of 50. San Jose being number 1, and Charlotte, North Carolina being the lowest major city at 50. Lessons learned from major public housing studies. Lessons that we learned from large HUD and Harvard studies are that if you take children particularly out of crime-ridden neighborhoods, albeit public housing, that doesn't function well. They do well if they are put into more affluent, less crime-ridden communities with more services. Things that these communities have to have in order to foster upward mobility are basically 5 factors. They cannot have segregated housing. They do not have a large degree of income inequality. They have good primary education. They have a setting which fosters a great deal of community involvement of its citizenry, a lot of volunteerism, and they also foster family stability. We will use these 5 factors as guides to develop policy to foster upward mobility within the Public Housing Authority and within our Haitian community in our housing authority once we develop an assessment of the unique needs of this Haitian population. Is the victim to blame? Programs currently are developing that blame tenants for having become dependent on public services and devise policies that wean them off of these services, namely the Better Life program promoted by the director of Worcester Public Housing, Ray Mariano, which has been approved as a federal program. We'll make a determination through questionnaires whether our own Haitian tenant population falls under this category. Did they escape from brutal dictatorship and numerous natural disasters, the journey thousands of miles to very unfamiliar lands solely to avail themselves of our public services? We'll test that assumption. Questions to be answered in this proposed research. Are the Haitian residents of our housing authority and our family developments content to remain using our services until they retire in place? In other words, are they the complacent public housing tenants that many political environments say they are? Or are they motivated intrinsically towards upward mobility and self-reliance? If the answer is number one, that they are content to retire in place on public services, the research needs to go no further, and the answers towards effective policy lie closer to the punitive Worcester housing approach. But if they're not, and they find that tenants really are motivated towards upward mobility and self-reliance, then we need to identify the unique needs of the Haitian tenants to establish policy geared towards their upward mobility within the context of the research of the 5 requirements of communities. Research methodology. The research was conducted in 2 parts, both parts involving information collected through questionnaires. Part 1. The first phase was to develop questions to determine whether there existed a disposition towards upward mobility and self-sufficiency, or whether tenants were content to retire in place. These questionnaires were first given to Haitian tenants in an elderly development, Walkling Court, and analyzed. The questionnaires also contained a broad variety of questions that attempted to assess their unique needs, including tools and skills needed to foster upward mobility. It was expected that a cluster of questions could be found among the elderly tenants' responses that would indicate a pattern of responses indicative of wanting to retire in place, not unusual among elderly tenants. Secondly, this question would then be given to tenants at our 2 family developments to see if their responses match those of the seniors wanting to age in place. If the responses at the family developments match those of the seniors, it would be determined that these tenants at family developments had no inclination towards upward mobility. Part 2 of the research If, however, we found that the responses of the family tenants did not reflect the desired age and play answered in a pattern of responses expressing desire towards upward mobility, we would then analyze the responses further and hope to learn from the questionnaire what the Haitian community's unique needs are at the family developments, from which policies could be implemented to further upward mobility and self-sufficiency. These are sample questions, both in English and in Haitian, that we gave out. Policy implications. The unique needs of the Haitian community that were found in the questionnaires patterns will be added to policy formulated from the HUD and Harvard studies around the 5 basic requirements of communities that need to exist at the Medford Housing Authority to foster upward mobility. Presently, the 5 requirements are being addressed and can be better addressed in the future as follows. Eliminating segregation. The MHA and all public housing is already subject to the Fair Housing Act, which can levy fines and criminal prosecution for discrimination housing related matters. Housing is provided on a first-come, first-served basis at the MHA-owned units, and we become an advocate for the tenant against discrimination and management of housing vouchers in the private housing market. Further policy implications. Number 2, compensating with services for income inequality. MHA presently limits the cost of housing to 30% of income, creates an escrow fund through its FSS program to accumulate savings that can be used as a down payment for a first-time home buyer, provides home fuel assistance, and a variety of other programs to make up for the income inequality that exists in Medford, and hopefully upward mobility will stabilize the tenant's income so it can adjust to the market itself. Further policy implications. Augmenting primary school quality. Although local schools are quite good, we believe there is still a need for after-school homework help for students, as well as English language classes for adults and a range of other adult education programs yet to be identified, hopefully through the questionnaire. We have such programs at our Willis apartments, but we have no community center at our LaPree family development, and we're currently trying to develop one, such as I helped develop at Leominster when I was the assistant director there. We started with a $400,000 state grant to build $1 million building. We used vocational high school students. 3 years later, an understanding architect, enormous community support, we ended up, which was a nationally recognized for design excellence. Some information is on the next slide. This is the learning center that I developed in Leominster while I was there. Lastly, policy implications. Fostering greater civic involvement. There's been a demand for citizenship classes and desire for civic political involvement among the Haitian community, and we're helping to foster that. The preliminary questionnaire illustrated a need for very basic educational primer regarding local Medford conditions, helping with shopping, banking, recreational facilities that are available in Medford, and we will provide classes in basic Medford living. Finally, fostering greater family stability. As mentioned previously, the Haitian community comes from an environment that has had a great deal of stress through draconian political systems and suffered through many natural disasters. And we believe we will have needs associated with these past traumas yet to be identified through this research. Thank you.